tasked with building a competitive landscape analysis by none other than Katie, actually, I believe. You wanted to share lessons learned from it, but I also wanted to start things off. Usually we go, Hunter, what's going on in your world? I want to start with this, Katie.
Yeah.
What was the impetus for having Hunter, the person at Klue, using Klue to conduct a landscape analysis for senior leadership?
Well, great question. So I think that was probably the beginning. Was that the beginning of the quarter, end of sort of Q3 for us?
That was the end of Q3.
Yep.
In prep for the SLT offsite.
That's right. So that's exactly it. So at the end of Q3, Q4 is when, as a senior leadership team, we start our process for our annual planning. So we typically will head to an offsite, and at that offsite, we're talking a lot about what's our 3 to 5 year vision, what's like the mission of where we want to head, what are we looking to do in the next year, and I tee up a ton of information to help prep leadership team around that, and that includes understanding and learnings about our markets, the competitive landscape, an understanding of all the markets we're currently operating in, ones we could operate in, what the revenue potential, sort of growth potential is for all the spaces that we play in. And so I really take it on as like some people will say like chief marketing officer, and there's a CMO who's now a CRO, Latney from Sixth Sense, and she refers to it as chief market officer. And the idea behind that is like it's our role as marketing leaders to drive the understanding of our market and to also guide and drive like revenue in how we develop our markets. So I wanted to put together for our leadership team a really strong perspective on what is happening in the context of our market, our specific competitors, and all of the markets that we're operating in and where the areas for growth. And so a big ask goes out to Hunter to help with that. A big ask goes out to the product marketing team to help us prep a bunch of information about our buyers, what's our recent win-loss information, and TAM size, all that sort of stuff. So there was actually a huge amount of work that was put onto the product marketing team over a really kind of condensed period of time to help prep for that. So it's hugely important, hugely impactful in terms of our strategic development and strategic planning, comes from the work that the product marketing and CI team is doing for us.
So you now get this put onto your plate. And you've walked through a little bit of your process. If folks didn't hear all of that, go back to one of our older episodes too. But you wanted to share maybe some of the lessons learned now that you went through that process. Also, SLT like used it, and you had a bit of time to kind of reflect on that. So reflect away.
Yeah, so there were a couple key learnings from this. I think this is one thing that I did touch on when we talked about this in a couple episodes ago, but buyer insights being so critical for putting this type of analysis together, because you need to not only understand like who you're competing with and what they're doing, but customer sentiment. And that was something that came up really early in our conversations. You said, I don't just want to know what our competitors are doing. I need to know specifically what our buyers are saying about them. And so just being able to pull in buyers' perspectives, whether that's from reviews, from win-loss, from churn, from renewal data, that was so critical. But then another learning is how much larger your competitive landscape is than you think. Like if you think that your competitive landscape is just your set of core competitors, maybe you're right, but you're probably not. Like your competitive landscape is probably a lot of adjacent solutions. It's probably some emerging solutions. It's probably even a whole bunch of different solutions stitched together. But you need to understand what are your buyers actually doing to solve their problems. Now, your product might be the absolute best way to solve that problem in the most like cost-effective way. But then there's probably some people who aren't aware of your product. There's probably some people who are trying to do things on their own, the way that maybe they were taught to do. But the big takeaway is if you look at your adjacent categories, you look at your emerging competitors, you look at all the different ways that people are trying to solve the problem that you are solving with your product, your competitive landscape is probably 10 times bigger than you think.
I could get a little bit more specific about an amazing slide that Hunter included as a part of this. There was one slide in the deck where normally we're looking at our competitors by category, right? So we'll look at market intelligence, competitive intelligence, sales enablement. Like what are the main sort of like commonly understood areas that we would play in? And we know who the competitors are in those sections. And Hunter put that onto one slide, and on the same slide, a totally different view, which actually walked through like all the steps of the work to be done by our customers and then listed out for each step what are all the different sort of like tools or alternatives that they could use at that step. So if it's information collection, might have been one. If it's analysis, it might be another. If it's content creation, it might be another. If it's like distribution, it was a different one. And so he, in framing out on one slide, this normal view that we look at, which is who are the competitors in our category, and then in the same view, who are the actual competitors? If we split that out into the work that our customer is doing step by step, and all the many different tools, spaces, places that they can get that work done, you get a much clearer understanding of how big your competitive landscape actually is. That slide to me was super powerful.
Yeah, 100%. Like being able to break things down by what are the jobs to be done.
Yeah.
I think a lot of products, especially like all-in-one solutions now, they solve for so many different types of use cases, and trying to break your product down into those use cases and find out what are the different competitors for each individual use case. Mm-hmm. That was even eye-opening from just like going through that process. Like, wow, we really need to think about our competitive landscape's actual size, not just its perceived size by who shows up at the very end of the sales cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's also, to me, that's a much more customer-centric view of looking at the alternatives in the landscape, because no one is ever looking for, maybe, but less so, who are the vendors in this category? You're looking for, I have a problem with Intel collection or analysis or content creation. You're looking to solve your work problem.
Yeah.
And so that's where you're going to start as a customer or buyer. So I love that view.
Yeah. And I think it also sheds a lot of light on the fact that like competitive is not just sales enablement at the very end of the sales cycle. The way you compete ought to flow all the way up to the way that you position among the hundreds of alternatives to your product. Like, compete is not just the very end of the process, it's the whole process. And I think you've got a pretty good perspective on that too.
Yeah, we had a conversation about this, didn't we, Hunter? I think I was speaking at the Macon conference, the Marketing AI conference, and I had put together these slides that finally crystallized my point of view, which is that like competing starts before first touch. It's like your first touch attribution, because who we choose to go after, the messaging and the way we position ourselves in the market, we're already competing from the first time that a buyer or a prospect like engages with your brand. You're already competing for mind share, for their perceptions of you versus others in the market. And so my full belief is that, and our goal as a marketing team is that we're trying to win in the minds of buyers before they've ever seen a demo. I want every single person that would come into Klue to have already chosen Klue like in their heart. This is the company I want to work with based on every interaction I've had with them, whether it was coming to their community event a year ago or coming to a webinar, reading a blog article or seeing something on social or a video. Like, this is a company I want to work with. And I have known that long before I've even started a formal evaluation. And so we need to be mindful about how we're strategically positioning, how we're differentiating, and how that's going to be consistently carried through the very first time they engage with our brand, all the way through to when they're actually comparing product or different packages side by side.
I think that's a good point to wrap here. That was I just kind of like was just looking back and forth and just letting you two cook there, which is very fun for me. It was a nice light day on the job here, Grayson.
For that 1.5 brain cells, that's a pretty nice gift.
He's just thinking about the purple carpet the whole time.
On that note, too, again, reiterate, folks, go check out 360 Win-Loss, because Hunter's going to be walking through it in a buyer-centric way. You're going to be sharing the ways that you've interacted with the product so far, how you've used it in your day-to-day, again, because you are the guy at Klue, using Klue. November 20th, check that out. Like and subscribe, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher even. Are you a Stitcher person?
I don't know what Stitcher
Are we even
is.
on Stitcher?
I don't know.
What is Stitcher?
We're big in Stitcher. We're missing subscribers. Yeah, helps with the show's growth, and appreciate everyone for tuning in. Catch you in 2 weeks' time.